What's good, gamers? Ion Hazzikostas just did an interview with Wowhead, and I'm here to give you the breakdown of everything that's been said. I've gone through it, I've made notes, I have a summary of everything. So there's a lot of things to get seriously excited for. Some things that I'm not quite on board with, and obviously I'm going to be sharing my opinions throughout this video. Without further ado, let's jump into it, shall we? Blizzard is aware of the frustration from players around the legendary weapon and the acquisition thereof. The problem is balancing, as weird as that sounds. Blizzard sort of needs to think through, the item is really cool, really awesome, I really want to have it, but also, if you give it to everyone, then is it really still really cool and I really want it? That's sort of the problem, and I feel like that's a problem for modern video games in general. If items are just dropping from everywhere like a pinata, who cares, right? Those items don't matter. But if they're so rare that you almost never see one, the frustration of not having that incredibly powerful item can actually lead to some people quitting the game. This is something Blizzard is very much aware of. They're talking about it constantly, and they're trying to think through how to best solve this problem. If you have a solution, or perhaps a potential solution, let me know in the comment section down below. They're also working on plans for the future, so that in a couple of patches from now, people aren't still hunting this weapon, because without it, you're just going to be removed, but they do want the item to have some longevity in terms of, you know, it is a legendary weapon, and it should feel legendary for at least a certain portion of the expansion. There was a lot of talk about log hooks, for those of you that don't understand. With the new Augmentation Evoker, Blizzard had to design brand new hooks for the combat log that would allow for damage dealt by other players as empowered by the Augmentation Evoker to apply to the Augmentation Evoker rather than to the other players. Now, the question that Wowhead asked here is, are there plans for this moving to other classes as well? Things like Wind Fury Totem, Chaos Brand, Power Infusion, things of that nature. To this, Ion said no. In their mind, Wind Fury Totems isn't the same as an Augmentation Evoker. You don't have that as sort of the core element of your class. It's really like a bonus. You're there because you like playing your class and you deal big boom boom, but then you also happen to give other people a bit of boom boom at the same time, and those log hooks will not apply, at least not for right now. They were also asked about the future of support classes and if we can see more classes becoming support classes or specs becoming support specs, and to this, again, a straightforward no. Blizzard have no plans of turning existing specs into support specs. As someone that's actually been sort of advocating for certain specs becoming support specs, either through talent acquisition, so I can choose talents that turn my Affliction Warlock into more of a support Warlock rather than a straightforward damage dealer, I do understand their argument here. Most players that have picked Affliction Warlock picked it because they wanted to do the big boom boom, right? They wanted to be the big damage dealer. If you then turn around and you turn this spec into a support spec, or even just give players access to talents that could turn it potentially into support spec, and it happens that that support spec is more powerful than the normal Affliction spec, you're gonna piss off a lot of people, right? Because they don't want to be a support Affliction Warlock, but now they're forced to because it's more powerful than the normal Affliction Warlock. That does not mean that there isn't plans for future support classes in World of Warcraft. Right now, they're doing it with the Augmentation Evoker, and they're keeping an eye on community feedback. How many people are actually going to be playing Augmentation? How do people feel about it? And this will definitely inform future decisions. So what I expect will happen here, in my opinion, I think it's going to be the addition of new specs. So you can imagine hunters, for example, getting a new spec, and this spec being Bard. And Bard hunters bring more support elements. Warlocks, Shamans, Paladins, all of these classes can have support specs baked into it, but for those of you that were afraid, don't be. Blizzard have no plans of turning your spec into a support spec. They were also asked about raid environments and raid spots specifically, And what are their fears around support specs starting to replace existing specs? And this is something that they're going to solve simply through balancing. I mean, it's an underwhelming answer, but it is also, I think, the only real answer you can give. You just have to balance it in such a way that a raid with a support spec will finish the raid and will be successful, but a raid without a support spec will also finish the raid and will also be successful. And then it just comes down to whatever the choice is. For Blizzard, the optimal raid design is one of each class. Fills out the 20-man roster in a Mythic raid. I think that's fair. I'm not entirely sure how that works out. To all of the raiders, let me know in the comment section down below. Is that how it currently works, or do most of you raid in guilds where some classes are just not taken at all? Not specs, classes specifically. Rogues, please take a seat. I have very, very bad news for you. You guys are not getting your rework in 10.1.5, despite what Blizzard said before the PTR even went live. Now, I understood Ian's argument here. Apparently, the reason you're not getting your rework, at least this was alluded to, because Ian said they want to be transparent and they want to tell players what they're doing. So what happens is they'll announce they're doing this rework, but then the developer that would do the rework would get ill or something would happen and they can't show up, they can't do it. And then you're stuck with this, okay, we promised the players that we're going to do this, but the right person for the job isn't going to be here for the next month, so they're not going to be able to do it. So do we give it to someone that isn't suited to the job, or do we just postpone it? And their current philosophy is they'll just postpone it. Because of how fast content is coming anyways, they can just do it for 10.1.7 or even 10.2. They don't want to rush it. Personally, I think this is sort of always going to be the rock and the hard place that you find yourself in. With more transparency also comes the ability to let people down more. Now, Ian did say one of the key things they're trying to bring across to players, regardless of what they say, if it's not in the PTR and on the PTR notes, it's probably not coming. So the PTR is the official list of everything that's coming. If they say something, it means they're working on it, but they're not going to give timelines until it's in the PTR notes. So, you know, use that in whichever way you want. So Rogues, wait a little bit longer, I suppose. So this next topic I'm covering pretty much word for word because I have no idea. The way I play WoW is I pretend PvP doesn't exist. But apparently there was some kind of 25% HP increase at some point, and they were asked whether or not they're happy with that increase. Short notes, yes, they're very happy. What ended up happening was before Dragonflight even launched, they started crunching the numbers from Shadowlands with all the new talent reworks and everything, and looking at the survivability that talents now bring, and they sort of realized that they're gonna have to buff HP by between 40 and 60% in PvP for this to make sense. And then they got scared. They were sort of immediately like, that's a lot of HP extra. Let's just wait and see how it plays out. In retrospect, Ian feels they should have just done it. They could have always pulled back later, but PvP is not in a good spot right now. They recognize that healers are just way too powerful, and so they're happy overall with the HP buff, and they are looking at, I think, doing more to balance this out by not necessarily healing or nerfing healers, but rather balancing the other classes to actually be able to deal with that. That's it, guys. I have nothing else to add to this. I don't PvP. I suck at it. Are you happy? On to customizations, and yeah, Warlock pets are getting complete customization overhauls, as most of you should know by now. It also comes with an incredible storyline attached to it, but they were asked in terms of other classes. Now, for Blizzard, the reason they started with Warlocks specifically is because of all the pet classes in World of Warcraft, Warlocks have the fewest amount of customizations. It's not like a hunter that can go out and pick the pet from the world that they want to play with. For a Warlock, it very much is, these are your demons, go for it. They're looking at more customizations. The way Ian spoke about it, They're actually looking at many more, even for Warlocks, adding more and more ways in which to customize your demons to look the way that you want them to look. They were also asked about the removal of things like Observer as well as Water Elemental. Ian here said that those two can't be asked in the same sense because they have nothing to do with each other. The Observer for Warlocks was removed because they want to be sure that when a player sees another player, that player has an idea of exactly what the other player can do to them. The Observer replacing the Foul Hunter just felt incredibly weird, because you have this thing that kind of looks like the Dark Glare, and yet it acts exactly like the Foul Hunter. They're looking at bringing the Observer back, but they're going to bring the Observer back so that it's completely different. It won't be a replacement of an existing demon, but rather a new demon that may actually be added to the spec at some point. So Warlocks will have to wait and see with that one. For Water Elemental, I thought this was actually very interesting. With the rework on mages, Blizzard started asking themselves, do they want mages, or even one of the specs for mages, to be a pet class? And the answer was no. Based on how people pick talents and stuff like that, Water Elemental was the lowest picked overall, which told them that most mages like this idea of being the lone warrior, right? I'm the glass cannon, I'm the one dealing the damage. They decided not to remove Water Elemental, it's still there. It's now just part of your Icy Veins. So when Icy Veins procs, or when you pop Icy Veins, it will also spawn a Water Elemental that will deal damage for that duration. That's the short and the long of it. Now onto the item that will instantly lead to a lot of people going, oh my god, losing their minds, and then hopefully cooling back down when they realize it's not actually as bad. Tier items, their drop rate is being nerfed into the ground from 3 tier items to 1. But all of the other gear on the bosses are actually gonna drop more. And Blizzard's reasoning for this is the Catalyst. Now that the Catalyst is active, one of the premier ways of getting tier items is actually through the Catalyst. So players start to actually feel, at least this is according to Blizzard and their own information and data, players start to feel bad when tier items drop from bosses, because it's not the tier items that they're after. They're after the other items that they can't actually make from the Catalyst. So this is why this is. It's more just a balancing thing. Overall, Blizzard is very happy with gear upgrades, you'll be surprised to know. However, they were asked about the Myth track and why the Myth track was added to the game. People didn't have incentive to do Mythic raids because of how high heroic gear could be upgraded. The Myth track was literally just an answer to that. Overall, Blizzard loves the fact that players have a lot more player agency in how they want to upgrade their gear, and they're looking at even more ways of doing that in the future. But fear not, it's pretty much all being looked at through a unified system. So they're not going to add more systems to upgrade your gear, but just more ways for that one system to upgrade your gear. This goes for open world players, raiders, mythic players, PvPers. They were then also asked about chase items. For those of you that don't quite know what that is, chase items are items that you must have. So like a ring that's just super OP and you absolutely have to have it. It leads to frustration. Blizzard is aware of that. The problem that Ian highlights, and I think I understand where Blizzard is coming from with this. You need to have a sense of excitement. After you've killed a boss and you're running towards the corpse, there's that sense of, oh my god, did it finally drop? The balance for Blizzard here is making that rare enough that when it finally drops, you go, yeah, bitch, I've got my item. Versus, finally, I have my item. They want to find a balance. They're not perfectly happy with that balance. Their current thinking, however, and I would love to get your thoughts on this, is to simply add more chase-worthy items into the game. Because that way, even if you have bad luck on one item, maybe you have better luck on the other item. Especially if it's like, let's say there's 4 chaseable rings in the game, rather than just the one. This, I think in theory at least, it will alleviate some of those problems. However, if it's like chase items across multiple item slots, then it's just going to lead even more frustration, because now I have even more gear slots that isn't perfect or finalized because of the rarity of the drop. And then finally, they were asked about, but chase items are staying. Just FYI. If you were hoping that they were going away, they are not. Dinars, they were asked about as well, if those are coming back, and Ian said, yeah, most likely with the final patch for Dragonflight. Good news there, I think. The Mega Dungeon is geared towards normal and heroic raiders, with hard modes that give cosmetic rewards being there for the more mythic raider, mythic dungeoneer, someone that really wants that challenge. The reason they made it cosmetic only is so that normal and heroic players doesn't feel forced to do hard mode unless of course they want that extra challenge. That being said, when asked about balancing specifically, Ian was very clear that they're not looking to make this a proper 10-minute long boss encounter kind of thing, but they are looking to make it a 5-player raid. And they were a lot more heavy-handed this time around as opposed to in the past for a number of reasons. One of those are just simply when the raid is coming out. In the past, whenever they released a new Mega Dungeon, it was at the beginning of a new tier, so it would not take long for people to just completely overgear it, and then it would just become a throwaway thing. This time around, it's sort of launching in the middle of a tier, so most people already have the base gear that they're gonna have, so they could balance this mini raid around that gear level. It's currently balanced for around 440 in general, so that people will have a much longer challenge. The other reason they were a little bit more heavy-handed, the raid is being split in two, or the dungeon is being split in two in 10.1.7, with heroic modes coming for people that really just want a story and want to see how it all plays out. So it's not going to be too long that you're going to have to wait before you can actually experience this Mega Dungeon, even if you aren't good enough, per se, to do it at the current level. So they're perfectly happy with this. I'm perfectly happy with it. How do you feel? WoW did actually ask Ian something that I've been talking about for a long time, and that is gear-capped dungeons. For those of you that don't understand, it's pretty much time-walking dungeons. The dungeon caps your item level and your gear at a specific point, and there is literally no way to overgear the content. So very much think ultimates in Final Fantasy XIV. You can literally go back to the first ultimates that were ever released years ago, and they will still be the exact same challenge now than what they were then, because the gear is completely standardized. Ian's answer to this, I thought, was relatively interesting, with a couple of caveats here and there. They don't like the way people play with capped gear. Something that they saw with people min-maxing time walking is the game starts to be played in a way that it was never actually designed to be played in, and people start optimizing weird stats because they can't get more gear or more item levels, and this is something that they don't want to encourage. That being said, the concept behind gear-capped dungeons is a test of skill. It's to ensure that players that want to see how good they are can go into a piece of content that basically always simply provides a skill check. And they are very open to that idea. That's definitely something that they think could be really cool. They're just not entirely sure how they wish to implement it. For my personal opinion here, I would say something like a template design could work if you really just wanted to have that skill check. So rather than having a capped gear check, it's just a template. So whatever gear you have really doesn't matter. And of course, to balance, Blizzard can just sort of play around with those template stats. I think that could work, but maybe I'm just completely bonkers. I don't know. It's something that I would definitely be interested in. I like sort of smaller group content nowadays, especially since playing a lot more casual. But I will be honest, Mythic Plus isn't really my thing, which coincidentally is kind of the next topic of the video. Surprise, it's Mythic Plus, as if I didn't say that just a couple of seconds ago. Yes, okay, so Blizzard is overall pretty happy with the removal of the seasonal affix. They're also very happy with affixes in general. It just happens to be that most players don't seem very happy with the affix system. That being said, it's not like Blizzard is going, this is the best system we've ever invented. No, they're aware that there are some problems. Some of the affixes they're not happy with. They call them passenger affixes. These are affixes that some players in the group just really don't ever deal with. There's like one guy running around doing everything because they're best optimized to do those things, and everyone else is just sort of chilling. They don't want that. They want to design the affixes to the point where everyone has to deal with those affixes. Personally, I still think even then, it's not necessarily going to work out as well as Blizzard may have wanted it to, just because it feels like there's a lot of shortcomings being exposed in the Mythic Plus system right now that maybe previously wasn't. And it may just be with the overall happiness of the game in general, people are starting to look a lot more critically at the content that takes them away from some of the things that they otherwise would want to do. I still believe that Blizzard's insistence that they will not go to a trick or treat system with Mythic Plus is a mistake. I do think that, yes, Mythic Plus is meant to be hard, but it can also be super fun. If you have an affix that if you do it wrong, it will be incredibly punishing. If you do it right, it'll be, well, much easier, but it will also be hard to do it right. Trick or treat. Do it right, you get a reward. Do it wrong, you get a punishment. I personally think that is the way that Blizzard should go with this, but according to Ian, this is not what they're looking for. They're happy overall, but there are some reworks planned for Season 3. So for those of you that aren't quite happy with Mythic Plus, at least you have some reworks, some rebalances to look forward to. I would be interested to know from you guys that do super Mythic Plus content, what don't you like about Mythic Plus? Or are you just super happy and you love everything about it? Let me know. Finally, Ian was asked about transmogs, and specifically tier 3 craftable transmogs. These are transmogs that have been removed from the game, and the only way to really get them is from the black market auction house. But Blizzard is looking at, especially on in the datamine files, they're looking at adding those recipes to crafters so that a crafter can make tier 3 items for players. Ian said that this is something the team is actively looking at, and they want to do it for pretty much all of the previously removed items in the game. It's definitely something that they like, but they are cognizant of the fact that there are people that spent thousands on acquiring certain pieces of gear that have already been removed from the game. And so these items, while craftable, will require a significant investment, not only from time perspectives, but also from gold perspectives. It'll cost a lot of gold. And I wonder if Blizzard isn't going to try and match the gold requirement to something akin to the black market. What they want is for more players to have access to these items, but not for black market acquirers to feel like they just wasted all of their money. You know, they spent months trying to farm all of these items on the black market auction house, and now suddenly everyone's just walking around with these previously removed items. Finally, Ian was asked about the sword, and his answer again was, what sword? So for all of us that's been seriously hoping that there's going to be some resolution with that fucking sword, it seems we're going to have to wait a little bit longer. Although at this point, it feels like they're just never going to do anything with that thing because they enjoy far too much just torturing us with it. And that, ladies and gentlemen, brings us swiftly, I say swiftly, it's been a long video, but it brings us to the end of said video. If you enjoyed this video, please remember to hit the like button, hit that subscribe button for more content, and also the bell because, well, you don't want to miss any of the new content. To all of the patrons, the YouTube members, and of course the Twitch subs, thank you so much for your monthly contributions. It does mean the absolute world to me. Without you, content like this simply would not be possible, and your contributions allow me to say no to scumbag sponsors. So thank you from the bottom of my heart. $1 a month gives you access to absolutely everything. Ladies and gentlemen, as always, be kind to each other, be good to each other, and I shall see all of you in the next one. Peace out, fam.